I stood before my wardrobe, carefully placing silk blouses into my carry-on. This business trip to Geneva was crucial, tied to a funding round on which my investment fund's future depended. From behind, my husband, Peter Harris, wrapped his arms around my waist. His chin rested on my shoulder, his voice as low and gentle as ever. "My darling, you work too hard. You're only gone for a few days. Why so much luggage?" I managed a faint smile, a smile I had mistaken for happiness for the past few years. "I have a lot of partners to meet. I can't just wear anything." "I know," he said, his arms tightening around me. "It just breaks my heart to see you always striving like this. You could leave everything to me and just be my beautiful wife at home." Oh, in the past, I would have melted at those words, turned in his arms, and felt like the luckiest woman in the world. My name is Evelyn Reed, the CEO of Orion Capital, a thriving venture capital firm in the heart of London. To the outside world, I was a cool and decisive career woman, but in front of Peter, I became a softer version of myself. He was the head of projects at our company, a position I had given him despite the whispers around the office, because I believed in his abilities and his love. I had always thought my success was his success, that half of my achievements were thanks to his quiet support. But recently, his sweet words no longer warmed my heart as they once did. A vague unease had bloomed within me, like a tiny crack on a flawless glass surface invisible to the naked eye, but threatening to shatter with the slightest touch. "I'm going to take a shower. Could you double-check my schedule for me?" I gently unwound his arms and went into the bathroom. As I soaked in the hot bath, I tried to wash away the nameless anxiety that clung to my thoughts, along with the day's fatigue. "It's probably just work stress," I told myself. "Peter loves me so much. Nothing could be wrong." When I came out, Peter wasn't in the bedroom. I assumed he was in the adjoining study. I walked over to the bedside table to scan the news before sleeping. Next to my phone, Peter's screen suddenly lit up with a message notification. I had no habit of snooping, but the single line of text on the lock screen froze me in place. The sender was Megan Jones. I could only see half the message. "Peter, the pain is so bad. I'm scared." My heart plummeted. I remembered her. Megan Jones, the intern with a pure and innocent image that Peter had praised endlessly. He'd told me she had come to London alone from a small town up north, struggling but diligent and ambitious. I was the one who had approved her year-end bonus, thanks to the glowing performance report he'd submitted. Pain? Scared? Why would an intern send such an ambiguous message to her boss in the middle of the night? Just then, Peter walked into the room. Seeing me staring at his phone, a flicker of panic crossed his face, but it was quickly masked by his practiced smile. He swiftly walked over and picked it up. "Ah, another spam text. They've been getting worse lately." As he spoke, his fingers moved deftly, deleting the message before I could get a proper look. "Right," I replied, feigning nonchalance. But a storm was already raging inside me. "I'm going to sleep. You should get some rest too." I lay down, turned my back to him, and pretended to close my eyes. I heard him let out a sigh of relief. Soon, he turned off the lights and lay down beside me. The room was dark, but my mind had never been clearer. That was no spam text. His panicked expression, the frantic way he deleted it, they betrayed him. Peter Harris, the man I had trusted with my whole heart, the man I married, against my family's wishes. What was he hiding from me? His familiar scent, the warmth of his embrace, they filled me with a chilling cold. I knew I couldn't confront him now. Without proof, My words would be nothing but baseless jealousy in his eyes. He was a master of deception. A rash move would only make him hide his tracks more carefully. "All right, Peter," I thought, my eyes wide open in the darkness. "If you want to act, I'll gladly play along." This trip to Geneva wouldn't just be about business after all. Sleep had completely abandoned me. The silent war had just begun, right here in my own bedroom. The next morning, I woke up with a bright smile, as if the suspicious text had never existed. Peter seemed relieved to see me, my usual cheerful self. His thoughtfulness was even more pronounced. He prepared breakfast, tied my scarf for me, and saw me off at the door with a lingering, reluctant goodbye. "Be safe, darling. Call me as soon as you land, all right?" I stood on my toes and gave him a light kiss on the cheek, my heart filled with an indescribable disgust. Before heading to the office, I enacted my own plan. I stopped at a nearby cafe, opened my laptop, and set my wheels in motion. I had thought it all through last night. To find the truth, a direct approach wouldn't work. When I arrived at the office, I went straight to Peter's desk. He looked up from his documents, surprised. "Evelyn, what are you doing here? I thought you were heading straight to the airport." I smiled, approaching him with a playful, almost girlish tone. "I forgot something. My main credit card has been having some issues with its limit lately. I'll have a lot of expenses entertaining partners in Geneva, so just to be safe, could I borrow yours?" In a marriage like ours, this was a perfectly normal request, especially in a situation demanding flexibility with major expenses. Peter hesitated for a moment, but seeing the trusting look on my face, he couldn't refuse. Refusing would be more suspicious. "Of course, sweetheart. What's mine is yours." He happily took out his wallet and handed me his platinum credit card. Holding that card felt like holding the key to a terrible secret. I thanked him and said I had to rush to the airport. But I didn't go to the airport. I went back to my own office and locked the door. The first thing I did was call the bank's VIP customer service. Using the card information, I requested a reset of the online banking access. As a long-standing VIP client, my request was processed swiftly. 5 minutes later, I was in. Taking a deep breath, I clicked on the transaction history with a trembling hand. A long list appeared. I patiently scanned through it, line by line. Groceries, restaurants, petrol. The usual expenses were normal, but my eyes stopped on the transactions from the last 3 months. Countless receipts from the Baby Emporium, London's most exclusive chain for luxury infant goods, newborn clothes, imported formula, a top-of-the-line pram, a designer cot. The total ran into tens of thousands of pounds. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. But that wasn't all. Next were the monthly payments to a prestigious Harley Street obstetrics clinic. And then, the final, devastating blow. A massive payment made just last week. The memo was starkly clear. VIP maternity package, Megan Jones. Megan Jones. The name stabbed into my heart like a shard of ice. So, the text last night about her stomach hurting, it wasn't a lie. It was labor. Peter, the man I loved, had been using our money to care for his pregnant mistress from the beginning of her pregnancy until the day she gave birth. The sheer audacity, the shamelessness, was beyond my comprehension. Rage and pain surged through me, and I almost smashed the laptop, but I held back. Crying or breaking things would solve nothing. I had to be colder and more calculating than ever before. I immediately called my best friend and lawyer, Olivia Chen. "Olivia, I need your help." My voice trembled uncontrollably. "Evelyn, What's wrong? Olivia sensed the distress in my voice. Where are you? I'm at the office. Peter, he's been having an affair. His mistress just had a baby. I told her everything I had just discovered. Olivia listened quietly, not interrupting. When I finished, her voice was firm and rational. Evelyn, listen to me. First, do not let him know you know anything. You have the upper hand right now. Don't throw it away. Second, send me the address of that small flat he said he was renting out cheaply to that intern. I'll have someone check it out immediately. Ima. Okay, I replied, my voice already regaining its composure. Talking to Olivia was like an anchor, pulling me out of the emotional abyss. Good. So, what about the Geneva trip? I looked out the window at the London skyline piercing the clouds. A cold smile spread across my lips. Of course I'm going. This play has to be seen through to the very end. Love was dead. All that remained was calculation and revenge. I would show Peter Harris just how cruelly the woman he dared to betray and underestimate could take back everything he thought he had. Sitting in my office, I stared intently at my computer screen. An email had just arrived from Olivia. The content was brief, but each word struck my chest like a hammer blow. Evelyn, I had someone check. There's no registered tenancy agreement for that Mayfair flat under his or her name. The neighbors said a young pregnant woman moved in a few months ago. They've seen Peter coming and going frequently, especially at night. There was no room left for doubt. His fabricated story about renting it cheaply to a poor student was nothing but a clumsy act to blind me, to turn my own property into a love nest for his mistress. How foolish did he think I was? I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs and steadying me. The tears wouldn't come. The pain was quickly being replaced by anger and resolve. It was time for me to act. I couldn't let those two shameless people continue to live comfortably on the fruits of my hard work and sacrifice. I called Olivia again. Liv, thanks. It's just as I expected. What's your next move? Olivia's voice was filled with concern. Evelyn, don't do anything reckless. You have to think of yourself first. I know, I replied, my voice as cold as ice. I'm not going to cause a scene or pull her hair. I want to catch them in the act. I want to leave him with absolutely no room for excuses. I explained my plan to Olivia. She was silent for a long moment, then sighed. All right, I'll have my people tail him. But you have to promise me, no matter what you see, you keep your composure. Our goal is to gather evidence and make him pay the legal price. Got it? I know. I've never been clearer in my life. After hanging up, I began to arrange everything again. This charade of a business trip, I had to perform it perfectly. Around lunchtime, Peter called. His voice was as sweet as honey. Darling, have you had lunch? Don't skip it. I'm having it with a partner right now. I lied without blinking. Oh, Peter. My flight has been delayed to the afternoon. I think I'll take off around 4 p.m. Looks like I won't have time to pop home for lunch. I said it deliberately to give him ample time to act. If I left early, he might be on his guard. But if I left late, he would think he had the whole afternoon free to attend to his important matters. Oh, that's a shame. I was going to come and pick you up for a bite. His voice dripped with fake disappointment. All right then, you handle your work. I'll come and see you off at the airport this afternoon. Okay, darling. I hung up and scoffed. His acting was improving by the day, but that was fine. The more perfect the play, the more painful the fall when the curtain came down. I did nothing for the rest of the afternoon, just sat quietly in my office, planning my next steps. I reviewed all our joint and personal assets, insurance policies, and investment portfolios. When this war was over, Peter Harris would not get a single penny from me. He wanted to play dirty. He couldn't blame me for being ruthless. At nearly 3 p.m., I left the office with my pre-packed carry-on. I didn't go home. I went straight to a cafe near the airport, found a secluded corner, and waited. Waited for the crucial moment, for the curtain to rise on this deceitful play. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Peter's familiar Audi pulled up in front of the cafe. He was still impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his expression gentle and attentive. He opened the car door for me and took the carry-on from my hand. Every action was that of a perfect gentleman. "Have you been waiting long?" "No, I just got here," I replied with the smile I had practiced in the mirror all afternoon. On the way to Heathrow, he constantly reminded me, "Take care of yourself over there, don't overwork, call me if anything happens, don't try to handle it all alone." I rested my head on his shoulder and nodded obediently, my heart as cold as a block of ice. Did he say these same tender words to Megan Jones? Did he whisper such sweet nothings to her while she carried his child? The thought made me sick. He was repulsive, and I was repulsive for being fooled by this charade for years. The car stopped at the departures hall. Peter got my case from the boot and walked inside with me. He escorted me all the way to the security entrance, as if to make sure I was truly leaving. In front of the gates, he pulled me into a long, tight hug. "I'll miss you," he whispered in my ear. I closed my eyes, suppressing the seething hatred in my chest. I returned his embrace, deliberately letting my voice sound choked with emotion. "Me too. You take care of yourself at home alone." "I will, you silly thing." He chuckled softly, released me, and gave me a gentle push forward. "Go on, you'll be late." I turned and walked away with my carry-on, not daring to look back. If I met his eyes for one more second, I feared I would explode right there. I walked straight towards the security gates and blended into the bustling crowd. I could feel his gaze still on my back. I did a loop around the check-in counters and quickly slipped into the ladies' room. Standing before the mirror, I saw my face. My eyes were red, not from sadness, but from rage. I took a deep breath and regained my composure. 5 minutes later, I walked out, but I didn't head for security. I took another corridor downstairs to the arrivals hall. Everything was going according to plan. I took out my phone and called Olivia. "I'm on my way." "Have your people started tracking his car?" "Yes." Olivia's voice was firm and reliable. "He just left the airport. He's heading towards Mayfair." For LibriVox, we're LibriVox for LibriVox for LibriVox. "Good. Stay on him. I'm heading there now." I hung up, went outside, and hailed a black cab. As the taxi sped down the motorway, I looked back at the receding Heathrow Airport. "Goodbye, Peter. Your play ends here. Now, it's my turn to direct the next act. The act where you become the most miserable loser." The taxi navigated through London's congested traffic. I sat in the back, clutching my phone, my eyes glued to the location tracking app Olivia's man had shared. The red dot representing Peter's car was moving decisively, showing no intention of returning to our home. He was heading straight for that luxury apartment block in Mayfair, just as I'd expected. "Driver, could you please go a little faster?" I urged, my heart racing. I didn't want to miss a single detail. When my taxi reached the destination, I asked the driver to pull over in an inconspicuous spot across from the main entrance. From here, I had a clear view of all the comings and goings. I could see that the car Olivia had hired was already parked discreetly nearby. Everything was in place. I waited. Every second felt like a century. I didn't know what I was waiting for, or rather, what I was afraid to face. Even though I had prepared myself, as the truth was about to unfold before my eyes, my heart still trembled uncontrollably. It was the pain of betrayal, a subtle, persistent ache. About 15 minutes later, I saw Peter dash out of the building's lobby. The usual calm, sophisticated demeanor was gone. In its place was an expression of extreme panic and worry. He ran to his car, flinging open both the front and back doors. And then, the scene I had dreaded most appeared. Peter ran back into the lobby and emerged a moment later, supporting a woman. It was Megan Jones. She was wearing a loose maternity dress, one hand cradling her full-term belly, the other leaning heavily on Peter. Her face was contorted in pain. She was in labor. Peter carefully helped her into the back seat, meticulously fastened her seatbelt, and leaned in to whisper something in her ear. That look of tenderness and concern I had once thought it was reserved only for me. I was wrong. He could give that tenderness to any woman who carried his child. Witnessing this scene with my own eyes, my world completely shattered. There were no more illusions, not a single shred of hope left. Love, marriage, home, everything I had painstakingly built over the years was now nothing but a ridiculous farce. Peter quickly got into the driver's seat, and the Audi sped away. I immediately called Olivia's man. "Follow them." "Yes, Miss Reed. They're heading towards the Portland Hospital for Women and Children." The Portland. The very name from the credit card statements. He had prepared everything perfectly to welcome his illegitimate child into the world behind my back. "Driver, take me to the Portland Hospital, please," I told the cabbie, my voice tight. I didn't cry on the way. It felt as if my tears had already dried up, leaving only a bone-deep emptiness and hatred. I had given him the benefit of the doubt, telling myself it might be a misunderstanding, but it wasn't. It was all real. The raw, brutal truth. My husband, the man I loved with all my heart, had sent me off on a business trip, only to immediately take his mistress to give birth to their child. "Peter Harris, you are truly something else. You've succeeded in making me the most pathetic fool in the world. But you forgot one thing. Once this fool wakes up from her dream, she becomes more terrifying than you could ever imagine." The Portland Hospital was one of London's most exclusive private hospitals. It wasn't loud and crowded like an NHS hospital. It was quiet and luxurious, like a 5-star hotel. Peter had chosen this place to give Megan and their child the best care and to avoid prying eyes. But he never would have dreamed that the one person he wanted to avoid most was standing right here. I paid the cab and got out. I didn't rush in. I stood in a quiet corner outside, watching Peter bustle about, handling Megan's admission. He scurried between the reception desk and the waiting area, his forehead glistening with sweat, but his eyes were filled with anticipation and happiness, a kind of happiness I had never seen from him before. A moment later, a nurse brought a wheelchair and took Megan towards the delivery suite. Peter immediately rushed to her side, held her hand tightly, and kept leaning in to soothe her. "Darling, don't be scared. I'm here. It'll be over soon. We'll get to meet our baby." "Peter, it hurts so much," Megan whimpered, her voice frail and pitiful. "I know. Just hang in there a little longer. You can do this." He gently wiped the sweat from her forehead, his eyes overflowing with love and sympathy. I stood just a few meters away from them, an invisible ghost, witnessing every scene of their heart-wrenching melodrama. My heart no longer ached. It had already turned to ice. This was the real Peter Harris when he was in love. With me, it had probably been nothing but utility and calculation from the very beginning. I took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and slowly stepped out from the shadows. I said nothing, just crossed my arms and looked at them both with a cold, piercing gaze. Peter was the first to see me. When he looked up and our eyes met, the smile on his face instantly froze. The tenderness and love in his eyes vanished, replaced by shock, terror, and utter disbelief. Evelyn? He stammered, his voice barely escaping his throat. How are you here? You're supposed to be on a plane. His face turned ashen, and his eyes stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. Megan, alerted by his reaction, turned her head. Upon seeing me, she froze too, seemingly forgetting her pain for a moment. The frail, pitiful expression on her face was replaced by fear and guilt. I curled my lips into a faint smile, a smile as sharp as a razor's edge. Why, Peter? Are you surprised? I finally spoke, my voice unnaturally clear and calm, echoing in the quiet corridor. Did my being here spoil your happy occasion? Peter snapped out of his nightmare-like trance, hastily letting go of Megan's hand and stepping towards me. He looked utterly bewildered. Evelyn, listen to me. It's not what you think. This is... He struggled for an excuse, but under my sharp gaze, all words seemed to fail him. The play was over, and the lead actor had been caught red-handed. I stood there, waiting to see what ridiculous story he would concoct next. Peter stood frozen to the spot, his face a ghastly shade of pale, looking utterly pathetic. He glanced at me, then back at Megan, who was cowering in the wheelchair. Panic was written all over him. Evelyn, just listen to me, he stammered, reaching for my hand. This is Megan. She's my distant cousin. She's all alone in London and about to give birth, so I'm just helping her out. Distant cousin. I almost laughed out loud. Even at this stage, he could still come up with such a clumsy, ridiculous lie. Did he really think I was a 3-year-old he could easily fool? Helping her? I repeated the words, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Is helping paying for a VIP maternity package? Is helping buying everything from nappies to formula? Peter, isn't this act getting a little old? Aren't you tired of it? Because I'm sick of watching. Each of my words was a needle, piercing the balloon of lies he was desperately trying to inflate. The color drained from Peter's face. He knew he could no longer hide it. The panic in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by irritation and resentment. Were you following me? He snarled, his gaze no longer fearful, but accusatory. I was, I admitted frankly, not flinching. If I hadn't, I'd probably still be foolishly believing that she was your distant cousin until you brought her and your baby into our home. He was speechless. Just then, Megan started moaning again from behind him, her voice weak. Peter, it hurts. It hurts so much. Her performance was truly endless. She was using the child to get his attention, to remind him which of them was more important. Peter looked back at her, a flash of pity in his eyes. That one look completely severed the last thread of affection I had for him. In front of his wife, he made no attempt to hide his concern for his mistress. When he turned back to me, his anger had completely overcome his reason. Perhaps because his perfect plan was ruined, or perhaps because his mask had been ripped off, He could no longer maintain his usual composure. "Evelyn, what do you know?" he yelled, his voice echoing down the corridor. "All you ever care about is work. Have you ever genuinely cared about me? Do you have any idea what I've had to put up with?" I stared at him, my eyes like ice. "Put up with? What right do you have to say those words? The one who's been putting up with things is me. I put up with your deceit, and I put up with you using my money to support your mistress. I don't care about you," I scoffed bitterly. "If I didn't care, did that director position you're sitting in just fall from the sky? The car you drive, the flat you live in, is there a single thing that isn't mine? Peter, you are an ungrateful, parasitic leech." My words ignited the powder keg of his already fragile ego. He was used to me propping him up, used to a life of effortless luxury. Now that I had ruthlessly exposed him, he completely lost control. "Shut up!" he screamed. And in that crazed moment, he raised his hand. A dry, sharp crack echoed through the corridor, and for a second, it felt like time stood still. My left cheek burned with a searing pain. I could taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Peter had hit me. The husband I once loved with all my heart, the man I had risked everything for, had struck me in public, in front of his mistress. I didn't cry or scream. I just slowly lifted my head and looked him straight in the eye. There was no regret in his gaze, only rage and the exultation of a weak man who had finally managed to fight back. That slap didn't just inflict physical pain, it shattered everything. Love, respect, memories, hope, all of it crumbled into ashes. From that moment on, between Peter and me, there was only hatred left. The space around us seemed to freeze after Peter's slap. Even Megan Jones stopped her moaning, her eyes wide as she stared at the scene before her. Perhaps even she hadn't expected Peter would dare to lay a hand on me. My cheek throbbed, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the icy chill in my heart. I didn't flinch. I just quietly met Peter's enraged, flushed face. My reaction seemed to be outside his expectations. He probably thought I would cry and scream like other women, but I was not them. Slowly, I raised my hand, not to touch my swollen cheek, but to take my phone from my handbag. I opened the front-facing camera and calmly held it up. Click. The shutter sound was crisp and clear. I took a picture of my face, the red, 5-fingered mark stark against my pale skin. Then, I turned the camera around to capture the entire scene. A still stunned Peter and Megan in the wheelchair, cradling her stomach. It was a perfect record of betrayal and assault. Peter stood there, dazed by my actions. What? What are you doing?" I lowered the phone, put it back in my bag, and smiled. It was a smile colder and more distant than any I had ever given before. "What am I doing?" I enunciated each word clearly, as if carving them into the air. "I'm collecting evidence for the divorce proceedings. You're finished, Peter." After saying that, I didn't spare him, or his mistress, another glance. I turned and walked away, my steps firm and decisive. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor was like the beat of a war drum, cold and resolute, heralding the beginning of the battle. Behind me, I heard Peter calling my name, his voice a confused mix of anger and fear, but I didn't look back. The bridge behind me had been completely burned. The only way now was forward. Stepping out of the hospital, I took a deep breath of London's humid summer air. I didn't go home, nor did I go to the office. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of Olivia Chen's law firm. Only when I was inside the car did I allow myself to tremble. But it wasn't from fear. It was from the rage that I had suppressed to its absolute limit. I was wrong. The biggest mistake of my life was trusting Peter, thinking that love could overcome all differences in background and values. The result was a slap in the face, both literally and figuratively. When I arrived at Olivia's office, she was waiting for me. Seeing the red mark on my cheek, she said nothing, quietly leading me inside and pouring me a glass of warm water. "He hit you?" Olivia asked, her voice firm. I nodded and showed her the photos I had just taken. I caught them both at the hospital. She was in labor. Olivia looked at the pictures, her elegant eyebrows furrowing. "Good, Evelyn. Very good. This evidence is more than enough. Now, listen to me. We're starting immediately." She pulled out a stack of documents and began explaining the next legal steps. First, freeze all his assets. Second, change the locks on your flat. Third, we send him the divorce papers, along with a restraining order. He committed assault. We can easily demand that he stay at least 100 meters away from you. I listened and nodded decisively. Do it. No mercy. I want him to pay for everything he's done. Don't worry. Olivia placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze steadfast. This is a war we will absolutely win. I'll make sure that bastard walks away without a single penny. Looking at my friend, I felt a strange sense of calm. The pain was still there, but it could no longer break me. From this moment on, I was no longer the Evelyn Reed who was weakened by love. I was Evelyn Reed, the warrior, fighting for my honor and my future. Leaving Olivia Chen's office, I felt as if I had been reborn. The vulnerability and pain were left behind. Now, only determination and cold reason remained. Since Peter wanted to take things this far, I would show him exactly what hell looked like. The first thing I did once I was in my car was to call my assistant, Sarah Jenkins, sharp, efficient, and fiercely loyal. "Sarah, I need you to follow my instructions," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Immediately contact the finance department and the bank to freeze all joint accounts and supplementary credit cards under my and Peter Harris's names. Also, revoke his access to all company funds. From now on, any transaction requires my direct signature. Do it now." "Yes, Miss Reed," Sarah replied without question. She knew that once I made a decision, no one could change it. I hung up and dialed the next number. This time, it was the security and management company for our luxury apartment building in Mayfair. "Hello, this is Evelyn Reed, owner of Penthouse 18. I need you to send someone over this afternoon to replace all the lock systems and update the security protocols. From now on, I am the only one with access rights. Please remove Peter Harris from the resident list." "Request received, Miss Reed." My final call was to a professional moving company. "I need a packing and removal service. Please go to Penthouse 18, Royal Mayfair Towers, and pack up all personal belongings of a man named Peter Harris from the master bedroom and study. Clothes, shoes, books, personal items, everything. Pack them carefully in boxes and move them to a public storage facility in South London. I will send you the exact address later. I will cover all costs." After arranging everything, I drove towards Royal Mayfair Towers. I didn't want to confront them. I just wanted to watch from a distance to ensure everything was proceeding according to my will. When I arrived, the security team was already working professionally, installing new locks and resetting the codes. In less than an hour, that magnificent penthouse was entirely under my sole control. Next, the moving team arrived. They worked quickly and efficiently. The designer shirts I had bought him, his gleaming leather shoes, the books he loved, everything was ruthlessly packed into boxes. I watched the scene quietly from my car across the street. Not a ripple of emotion in my heart. Those things were once tokens of my love. Now, they were just inanimate objects that needed to be cleansed from my life. I remembered the clothes and belongings Peter's mother had left in the guest room during her visits from the countryside. After a moment's thought, I called the moving company supervisor again. "Sir, please also pack up the belongings of an elderly woman from the second-floor guest room and send them to the storage unit." If I was going to clean house, I had to be thorough. I didn't want a single thing related to that family remaining in my home. When the last boxes were loaded onto the truck and driven away, the penthouse looked strangely empty, but I felt an immense sense of liberation, as if a heavy burden that had been crushing my shoulders for years had finally been lifted. Night was falling. I knew that at this hour, Peter was probably at the hospital, basking in the joy of fatherhood. He had no idea that the real storm was just beginning, a storm created by my own hands, one that would sweep away everything he ever had. At the hospital, Peter gazed at his newborn son, who had just been brought out from the delivery suite. The anger and turmoil from his confrontation with Evelyn seemed to have vanished. He felt only boundless happiness and pride. He had a son, an heir to carry on his name. Megan was exhausted from childbirth, but wore a contented smile. She looked at Peter and said sweetly, "Peter, he looks just like you." "Of course he does," Peter laughed, kissing her forehead. "He'll be as smart and handsome as his dad when he grows up." As he drifted in a beautiful dream of a future with money and a son, a nurse came in with the hospital bill. "Mr. Harris, you'll need to settle the remaining balance at the billing office." "Yes, right away," Peter replied cheerfully. He thought to himself how thoughtful it was of Evelyn to have prepaid a large portion. He took out the platinum card Evelyn had always given him and confidently walked to the billing office. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined," the clerk said after swiping it several times. "That's impossible," Peter frowned. "Try it again." "That card has an extremely high limit. I've tried multiple times, sir. The system says the card has been suspended." "Suspended?" Peter was stunned. He quickly took out another card, also a supplementary one from Evelyn's account. The result was the same. "This one is suspended too, sir." A sense of foreboding crept into Peter's heart. He hastily opened his banking app, but he couldn't log in. The system notified him that his account had been deactivated. Just then, his mother, who had rushed down from the countryside, arrived. The moment she saw her grandson, she couldn't contain her joy. "Oh, my grandson, the heir to our family. He's the spitting image of his father." But her joy was short-lived. Peter had to deliver the news that he was now penniless. Upon hearing this, his mother nearly fainted, then began spewing curses at Evelyn. That vicious shrew, a barren hen who's just jealous. With no other choice, Peter used his mother's meager savings to barely cover the hospital bill. He decided to take Megan and the baby straight to their Mayfair flat. No matter how angry Evelyn was, it was still their home, and she couldn't just kick him out. Besides, he thought, maybe seeing such a beautiful baby would soften her heart. But when the taxi carrying the three of them and all their luggage arrived at the gates of Royal Mayfair Towers, Peter faced another shock. The security guards stopped the car. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. You are no longer a resident here, so you cannot enter." "What are you talking about?" Peter shouted in fury. I'm the husband of Miss Evelyn Reed, the owner of Penthouse 18. I'm sorry, sir. Miss Reed has requested your removal from the resident list. We are just following protocol." Peter couldn't believe his ears. He got out of the car and ran to the main entrance, frantically ringing the intercom and shouting Evelyn's name. But the only response was an eerie silence. He tried to open the door with his fingerprint, but the system registered an error. The locks had been changed. His mother sat in the taxi, holding the baby, weeping and cursing. Megan, exhausted and in pain from the delivery, remained silent, her face a mask of disappointment. Just as Peter was reaching the peak of his helplessness and rage, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn. He opened it hastily, hoping her anger had subsided, but the message was a single, emotionless, ice-cold sentence. "All of your and your mother's belongings have been moved to South London Public Storage, Unit a 234. I've prepaid 1 month's rent. After that, it's up to you. Don't ever show your face to me again." Peter clutched the phone, his whole body trembling with rage. He had literally been thrown out onto the street, penniless, homeless, with nothing but a complaining old mother, a recovering mistress, and a wailing newborn. In just half a day, he had fallen from the pinnacle of prestige and happiness to the depths of despair. And the person who had pushed him off the cliff was none other than the wife he had so ruthlessly betrayed. After being kicked out of the apartment building, Peter, gritting his teeth, found a small damp bedsit in an outer burrow. The musty smell and cramped space were torture for someone accustomed to a life of luxury. His mother, Mrs. Harris, took one look at the place and began wailing and cursing again. "That vicious woman! How dare she do this to my son and the heir of our family? Peter, you can't just let this happen. You have to go to her company and fight for your rights." His mother's goading, combined with his own boiling anger and desperation, made Peter decide to force a confrontation. He refused to believe Evelyn could be so heartless. She was probably just angry. If he went and caused a scene, applied some pressure, she would surely back down. The next day, Peter and his mother headed to the office building that housed Orion Capital. He still had his employee access card, so he easily passed through the security gates. They went straight to the 38th floor, where my office was located. The entire office was shocked by Peter's appearance. He was no longer the dapper, confident head of projects. He was a disheveled man with stubble and wrinkled clothes. Beside him stood a middle-aged woman in frumpy attire, her face contorted with fury. "Where is Evelyn Reed? Tell her to come out right now." Mrs. Harris screamed at the reception desk, oblivious to the stares of everyone around her. The receptionist, terrified, quickly called my assistant. Sarah rushed out and stood in their way. "Mr. Harris, Mrs. Harris, Miss Reed is in an important meeting and cannot see you. If you have a message, please leave it with me." "Aw, meeting? What damn meeting?" Mrs. Harris shoved Sarah aside and stormed towards my office. What meeting could a barren woman have? She's just hiding, trying to avoid her responsibilities. You think you can hide forever? Her venomous shouts echoed throughout the entire floor. Employees from other departments poked their heads out, curious. Peter, far from stopping his mother, stood by with a look of grim satisfaction, as if this was his way of shaming me. My office door swung open, but it wasn't me who came out. It was 2 tall security guards. "You two need to leave now," one of them said coldly. "This is a place of business, not a place to cause a disturbance." "You dare kick me out?" Mrs. Harris's eyes widened. "Do you know who I am? I am Evelyn Reed's mother-in-law." We don't care who you are. Miss Reed has given instructions that anyone causing a disturbance without permission is to be removed. With that, the guards moved to escort them out. Peter finally erupted in anger. Evelyn, come out. What are you doing hiding in there? How can you do this to your husband and mother-in-law? Are you even human? He was trying to appeal to people's sympathies, but only silence came from my office. Just then, a man in a sharp suit approached them. It was a lawyer from Olivia Chen's firm. He calmly handed a file to Peter. Mr. Harris, I am legal counsel for Miss Evelyn Reed. This is a divorce petition, with attached evidence of your adultery and domestic violence. And this is a court-issued restraining order. From this moment on, if you come within 100 meters of Miss Reed, we will immediately contact the police. Peter stared blankly at the documents in his hand. Divorce petition, evidence of adultery, assault, restraining order. Evelyn had moved far faster and more ruthlessly than he could have ever imagined. All his escape routes were cut off. Mrs. Harris, oblivious to the legal implications, grew even more belligerent, seeing her son's apparent defeat. Divorce? What divorce? There are no divorces in this family. If my son did anything wrong, it's because of that ill-mannered wench. Since she couldn't have a child, my son had to have one outside, didn't he? You need to leave. Now. The security guards had lost their patience. One grabbed Peter, the other took Mrs. Harris by the arm, and they were mercilessly dragged out in front of dozens of employees. Like cornered animals, Peter and his mother were consumed by humiliation, rage, and helplessness. As he was being forced out, Peter let out a final scream. Evelyn, you think you've won? Just you wait. I won't let you get away with this. The lift doors closed, and silence returned to the floor. I watched the entire spectacle from behind the semi-transparent glass of my office, a cold smile on my lips. Peter, what do you think you can do to me now? This game was your loss from the moment you raised your hand to me. Humiliated and ejected from the company, Peter and his mother returned to their shabby bedsit. The shock of the divorce papers and the restraining order had completely broken him. He collapsed onto the creaky bed, clutching his head. Everything had happened too fast, too brutally. He had underestimated Evelyn. She wasn't a gentle kitten he could control at will. She was a tigress who, once angered, would tear her prey to shreds without mercy. Mrs. Harris, after exhausting herself with curses, started to cry. Oh, my cursed fate. I worked so hard to put my son through university. Thought he had made it. And now look at this. That vicious woman is determined to ruin our family. Peter said nothing. His mind was in turmoil. No money, no home, and now, no job. Evelyn had blocked everything. He was literally a pauper. What could he do now? Go back to the countryside? He couldn't. The once successful head of projects returning to his hometown as a failure. A laughingstock, he couldn't accept it. In his moment of despair, the sound of a baby crying came from the next room. Megan was struggling to soothe the child. The cry pierced through Peter's chaotic thoughts like a ray of light. That's right, he still had one last weapon. A weapon Evelyn could never have. A son. He shot up and went to Megan's room. Seeing the red-faced infant in her arms, a fierce hope surged within him. Mother, stop crying, he said to his mother, his voice firm. We haven't lost yet. We still have him. He pointed at the baby. Mrs. Harris looked at her grandson through tear-filled eyes, a realization dawning on her. Yes, we have our heir. He's a Harris, our family's bloodline. Peter took the baby into his arms. Feeling the weight of the small life, he knew this wasn't just a son, it was his last trump card. Evelyn couldn't have children. That was her fatal weakness. No matter how rich or powerful she was, in the eyes of people like his mother, she was an incomplete woman. No matter how modern society became, the deep-rooted preference for sons still lingered. She wants a divorce? Fine, Peter said, his voice now calm and calculating. But she has to compensate us. This child is my son. Even if we divorce, as his father's wife, she has a responsibility to provide for him. We'll demand a huge amount of child support, enough for the three of us to live in luxury for the rest of our lives. His mother's eyes lit up. That's right. We have to get it from her. That woman has so much money. What's a little for her grandson? It's not like she could have one herself. She should be grateful my son gave her the chance to be a mother in name. Oh, Megan, lying in bed, overheard their conversation, and her heart filled with hope. She didn't care about the divorce. She only cared about the money. If Peter could extract a large sum from Evelyn, her and her son's future would be secure. And so, in that cramped, damp bedsit, three people with different schemes found a common goal. They pinned all their hopes on the newborn baby, believing he was the golden key to a life of wealth and their ultimate weapon against Evelyn. Peter hired a cheap lawyer and began drafting his demands for the divorce settlement. Not only did he demand child support, but he also shamelessly demanded a 50% split of all assets, citing his significant contributions to the company's growth. With a son on his side, he believed he couldn't lose. He vowed to make Evelyn Reed regret the day she ever dared to treat him this way. A few weeks later, our first divorce mediation hearing took place. I walked into the courtroom looking calm and composed. Beside me was Olivia, who appeared even sharper and more confident than I did. Across from us sat Peter. He had tried to clean himself up, wearing the most presentable suit he owned. Beside him were his mother and a lawyer who looked conspicuously inexperienced. The mediation began. After the judge read out the procedures, Peter's lawyer spoke first. "Your Honor," he began, rising with a pompous air, "we are here today to resolve the dissolution of the marriage between my client, Mr. Peter Harris, and Miss Evelyn Reed. Their marriage lasted 5 years, during which my client was a devoted husband, a filial son-in-law, and most importantly, a key figure who made immense contributions to the growth of Orion Capital, the company led by Miss Reed." Hearing this, I raised the corner of my mouth in an almost imperceptible smirk. Immense contributions? The nerve he had. The lawyer continued to paint Peter as a capable and virtuous man. With his strategic vision and exceptional business acumen, Mr. Harris personally secured projects worth tens of millions of pounds, bringing enormous profits to the company. He sacrificed his time and energy, dedicating everything to their joint enterprise. It is no exaggeration to say that half of the wealth Miss Reed possesses today is the result of my client's blood, sweat, and tears. Ugh. Peter nodded in feigned agreement, even managing to look humble. His mother puffed out her chest, shooting me a triumphant glare. The lawyer's tone then shifted to one of pity. In return for such sacrifice, Miss Reed was a cold, work-obsessed wife who failed to fulfill her natural duties as a woman. This created an irreparable rift in their marriage. At the height of the conflict, she ruthlessly threw her husband and mother-in-law out of their home and froze all their assets, plunging my client into dire straits. He paused for dramatic effect, then delivered his final demand. For these reasons, we petition the court for the following. First, to grant the divorce. Second, regarding the division of assets, we demand that 50% of all assets under Miss Reed's name, including the Mayfair flat, luxury vehicles, bank savings, and her 50% stake in Orion Capital, be awarded to my client. This is just compensation for his dedication. The courtroom fell silent for a moment after that demand. Even the judge frowned at the sheer audacity. Beside me, Olivia remained unruffled, a faint smile playing on her lips. Peter's lawyer sat down, looking confident, as if victory was already his. Peter looked at me, his eyes a mixture of challenge and anticipation. He thought he could get what he wanted by diminishing me and inflating his own contributions. He thought that, for the sake of my reputation, I would quietly give up a portion of my assets to end things. He was wrong. In this game, I would not yield a single inch. After Peter's lawyer finished his statement, the judge turned to our side. The respondent may speak. Olivia rose gracefully. She didn't rush to rebut, but instead gave the opposing lawyer a polite smile. Your Honor, esteemed counsel, she began, her voice clear, distinct, and powerful. We have just heard a very moving modern fairy tale about a dedicated and capable husband. However, fairy tales are rarely real, and the truth of this matter is quite the opposite. Peter and his lawyer frowned. Olivia continued. The plaintiff's counsel claims Mr. Harris made immense contributions and secured projects worth tens of millions. We are very curious about these so-called contributions. As such, we have prepared some materials. She signaled to her assistant. Thick binders of documents were distributed to the judge and to Peter's side. Your Honor, this is the financial report and performance evaluation for all of Orion Capital's projects over the past 3 years, audited by an independent accounting firm, Olivia said, gesturing to the documents. I would direct the court and the plaintiff to page 15, which summarizes the performance of projects directly managed by the head of projects, Mr. Peter Harris. Peter hastily flipped to page 15, and his face instantly changed color. Olivia didn't give him time to process, raising her voice. According to the report, over the last 3 years, Mr. Harris was in charge of a total of 5 investment projects. The result? 3 of those projects incurred massive losses, costing the company over £50 million. The other 2 barely broke even, but their operating costs were 30% higher than average. The tens of millions in profits, mentioned by counsel, simply do not exist. In fact, Mr. Harris's projects were a liability that had to be covered by the profits from other departments. A murmur went through the courtroom. Peter's lawyer, his face pale, stammered, This is fabricated data. Fabricated? Olivia laughed coldly. Counsel. This report was audited by one of the Big 4 accounting firms. If you claim it's fabricated, we would be more than happy to call their representative as a witness. Or are you suggesting your client is capable of deceiving the international audit system? The lawyer was speechless. Peter hung his head low, his entire body trembling with rage and humiliation. Olivia didn't stop there. As for Mr. Harris's so-called dedication and sacrifice, we also have something to clarify. My client, Miss Reed, is indeed a woman dedicated to her work, but it is precisely because of her hard work that Mr. Harris was able to enjoy a luxurious lifestyle he could never have dreamed of otherwise. She submitted another set of documents. This is the transaction history for all accounts and credit cards, Miss Reed provided to Mr. Harris over the last 5 years. Luxury cars, designer clothes, extravagant holidays, fine dining, every expense was covered solely by my client. So, what exactly was Mr. Harris sacrificing? The time he could have been working while enjoying his wife's money? At this point, Peter couldn't remain silent. He shot up from his seat, pointing a finger at Olivia. You're just a silver-tongued devil. Mr. Harris, sit down, the judge ordered, banging his gavel to maintain order. Peter reluctantly sat, but the look he gave Olivia and me was murderous. Olivia smiled and delivered the final blow. And finally, Your Honor, regarding the demand for a 50% division of assets, this demand is entirely baseless, because all the assets listed by the plaintiff, the flat, the cars, the company shares, are Miss Reed's prenuptial property, and we have legally notarized documents to prove it. According to current law, Mr. Harris is not entitled to a single penny of these assets. A dead silence fell over the courtroom. Olivia's declaration was like a thunderclap to Peter and his mother. They were completely stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. Their plan to claim a share of the fortune by citing his contributions had been utterly demolished in the first round. The evidence presented by Olivia Chen was like a bucket of ice water thrown in the faces of Peter and his lawyer. Their plan to divide the assets by claiming contributions was a complete failure. Peter's inexperienced lawyer was visibly flustered, beads of sweat forming on his brow. He couldn't offer a single meaningful rebuttal. Peter kept his head down, his hands clenched so tightly under the table that his knuckles turned white. Humiliation and rage burned inside him. He never imagined Evelyn would be so thoroughly prepared, leaving him no room to maneuver. Seeing the situation turn against them, Peter's lawyer quickly changed tactics. After receiving the judge's permission, he rose again. This time, his voice was not confident, but filled with pathos. "Your Honor," he began, casting a reproachful look at me. "It is true that those assets are in Miss Reed's name. My client, out of his immense love and trust for his wife, never concerned himself with such matters. He believed that what was his wife's was his, that everything was for their shared home. But he was mistaken." He paused for dramatic effect. "What my client craved most in this marriage was not money or status. It was a child, the warmth of a complete family. But Your Honor, Miss Reed was so engrossed in her business that she failed to fulfill the most basic of a woman's duties. She could not bear a child." His words were like a bomb dropped in the middle of the courtroom. All eyes turned to me. Peter's mother immediately seized the opportunity and began to sob pitifully. "Oh, the fate of our family. Other daughters-in-law bear children, but all my son wanted was an heir to carry on the family name, and he couldn't even have that. You can imagine how much my son suffered, Your Honor," Peter's lawyer continued in a mournful tone. "It was because of this lack of affection and his deep desire to be a father that my client made an inadvertent mistake. He had a son outside the marriage. That child is innocent. The child needs a father and deserves to be provided for to grow up healthy. My client, after being ruthlessly kicked out by Miss Reed, is penniless and unable to raise the child." Often, at this point, their ultimate goal was revealed. "Therefore," he said, looking directly at the judge, "we will no longer demand a division of assets. Instead, we demand that Miss Reed, as his former wife, bear the financial responsibility for her husband's child born out of wedlock. We demand a one-time payment of £5 million in alimony and child support to secure the child's future. This is a responsibility and compensation Miss Reed must fulfill for the pain my client has endured." Hi, £5 million. The courtroom buzzed again at the sum. This was no longer child support. It was blatant blackmail. They were using the child to extort a huge sum of money from me. Peter lifted his head and looked at me with challenging eyes. He believed this was his final trump card. He believed that, for the sake of my reputation, under the pressure of public opinion, and because of the stigma of being a barren woman, I would accept his demand. He was trying to use his son to deliver a fatal blow to take my money and humiliate me. I remained seated, my expression unchanged. I glanced at Olivia, who was also looking at me. A sharp light glinted in her eyes. That's right, Peter. This is the moment I've been waiting for. You've walked right into the trap I set for you. The most interesting part of the play is about to begin. The audacious demand from Peter's side and their accusatory words filled the courtroom with a tense atmosphere. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. They probably expected me to be angry, to rebut, or to feel humiliated. But I did none of those things. Olivia stood up. There was no trace of anger on her face. Instead, she wore a magnanimous smile. "Your Honor," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "We fully understand the feelings of Mr. Harris and his family. Having a child to carry on the family line is a legitimate desire." Olivia's words caught Peter and his lawyer off guard. They hadn't expected us to concede their point so easily. Olivia continued in an even more empathetic tone. "My client, Miss Reed, is also a compassionate woman. Although Mr. Harris committed a grave error during the marriage, she believes that the child is entirely innocent and deserves the best possible future." Hearing this, Mrs. Harris stopped her sobbing, and a smug look appeared on her face. Peter, too, puffed out his chest, thinking I had caved to public pressure and was ready to surrender. "Therefore," Olivia said, looking straight at Peter, "regarding the demand for child support, my client fully agrees." This time, Peter's side couldn't believe their ears. "Agreed? Just like that? Not only does my client agree to the £5 million, Olivia continued, each word more stunning than the last, she is also willing to establish a £10 million trust fund for the child, ensuring a prosperous life until adulthood. £10 million. The amount far exceeded Peter's expectations. He was dumbfounded, an undeniable greed flashing in his eyes. His mother nearly jumped for joy. They thought they had won, that they had found my weakness, but they celebrated too soon. After casting the rich bait, Olivia slowly delivered the killing blow. "However," she said, the smile still on her lips, but her eyes turning sharp, "to ensure this substantial sum is delivered to the correct recipient and to protect the child's legal rights and future, we have one small requirement, a perfectly standard legal procedure." She paused, looking straight into Peter's expectant eyes. "We request that the court order a paternity test, a DNA test, to confirm the biological relationship between Mr. Harris and the child. This is an essential step to complete the legal process for establishing the trust fund and to ensure everything is transparent and in accordance with the law." The air in the courtroom froze at that request. Peter, who had been lost in a fantasy of £10 million, scoffed when he heard the demand. He looked at Olivia and me with a mixture of contempt and pity. "A DNA test?" he said arrogantly. "Of course. I completely agree. I was worried you wouldn't have the guts to ask. Go ahead, by all means. Let's show the whole world that I am this child's father. I wonder what face Miss Reed will have to show anyone then." He thought this was a golden opportunity to humiliate me once again. He believed the DNA test results would be irrefutable proof of his virility and my failure. Without a moment's hesitation, he agreed to our demand. His lawyer nodded vigorously, Your Honor, we fully consent to the test. The judge looked at me. Seeing that Olivia and I were still composed, he nodded. Very well. The court approves the request for a paternity test. The results will be announced at the next hearing. The judge banged his gavel. The hearing was adjourned. Peter and his mother left the courtroom with triumphant expressions. They believed victory was already in their hands. They dreamed of the 10 million pounds and the humiliation I was about to face. I watched them go, a faint smile playing on my lips. Peter, you are so naive. You have no idea that your own arrogance and greed have just pushed you to the brink of your own demise. The play you so carefully constructed is about to have its final curtain call. A week later, the court reconvened. The atmosphere was even more tense than before. Peter and his mother arrived early, unable to hide their excitement and anticipation. He even shot me a provocative smile as if to say, "You're finished." Megan was not present, presumably at home with the baby, waiting for the news of their victory. I remained as calm as a placid sea. Beside me, Olivia calmly organized her papers, occasionally glancing at the opposing side with a meaningful look. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose, and Saturday, after the usual procedures, he spoke in a solemn voice. Today, the court will announce the results of the paternity DNA test conducted by the London Genetics Centre between Mr. Peter Harris and the infant born to Miss Megan Jones. He carefully picked up a sealed envelope. The entire courtroom held its breath. Peter puffed out his chest and sat up straight, ready for his moment of glory. His mother clasped her hands in front of her chest, muttering a prayer. The judge slowly opened the envelope and took out the report. He glanced at it, and a slight frown crossed his face. There was a clear look of surprise in his expression. This subtle change made Peter feel a flicker of unease, but he quickly dismissed it as nerves. After a few seconds of silence that felt like an eternity, the judge cleared his throat and read the result aloud, each word echoing clearly through the courtroom. Based on the DNA analysis of the samples provided, the London Genetics Centre has concluded that Mr. Peter Harris is excluded as the biological father of the child in question. The probability of paternity is 0%. A deathly silence enveloped the room. Excluded as the biological father. Those words struck Peter like a bolt of lightning. The triumphant smirk on his face froze, then shattered into a million pieces. His face went from red to white, then to a ghastly shade of blue. He stared blankly at the judge, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No, that's not possible," he muttered, his voice hollow. "It can't be. Something's wrong. There must be a mistake." His mother, sitting beside him, had turned to stone. She couldn't understand what was happening. She shook his arm violently. "Peter, what is the judge saying? It's a mistake, isn't it? He's my grandson." The courtroom erupted in whispers. All eyes were on Peter, a mixture of curiosity, pity, and ridicule. "Order." The judge slammed his gavel down hard. He looked at Peter with a stern gaze. "This is the official finding from a certified forensic institution, complete with signatures and an official seal. There is no possibility of error. Mr. Harris, did you hear me clearly?" Peter heard nothing. His ears were ringing, and the world around him seemed to spin and then collapse. He had bet everything on this child, the son he so desperately wanted. He had used the child as a weapon to confront me, to blackmail me, to insult me. But now, that weapon had turned back and pierced him through the heart. The child wasn't his. Then what was he? A cuckold who had been raising another man's child, a fool who had been cheated on. This truth was far more brutal than me freezing his assets, more humiliating than being kicked out of his home. It completely destroyed his pride, his very manhood. He had lost everything: his wife, his home, his money, his job, and now, even the son he was so proud of was not his. He slumped in his chair, his body as limp as if his bones had been removed. He looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with defiance, but with panic, despair, and an extreme, seething hatred. I simply looked back at him, emotionless. For the first time during the entire trial, the corners of my mouth lifted into a victorious smile. Peter, this is the price you pay for your betrayal and your foolishness. The trial ended in chaos. Peter nearly went berserk, screaming that the results were fabricated, that I had bribed the genetics center. But in the face of the clear red seal and the signature of the forensic institution, his words were meaningless. He and his mother were dragged out by the court bailiffs, a pathetic sight. Olivia and I left calmly. "What a spectacular soap opera," Olivia remarked sarcastically. "I've never seen a plaintiff so brilliantly dig their own grave in a divorce case." I just smiled faintly. He was just too arrogant and too greedy. I knew Peter wouldn't let it rest. He would go to Megan to find out the truth, and I was looking forward to their next little drama. Sure enough, as soon as he left the courthouse, Peter didn't go back to the bedsit. He took a taxi straight to where Megan was staying. He was no longer capable of reason. Rage and humiliation had turned him into a beast. He kicked the door of the flat open. Megan was feeding the baby and jumped in terror at Peter's ferocious appearance. "Peter, why are you back so early? Did everything go well?" "Go well?" Peter snarled, his eyes bloodshot. He pulled the DNA test result from his pocket and threw it in her face. "Read this. See what you've done." Megan picked up the paper with trembling hands. When she read the words, "excluded as the biological father," the color drained from her face. How is this possible? There must be a mistake," she stammered, but the terror in her eyes betrayed her. "A mistake?" Peter grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her violently. "You still have the nerve to say it's a mistake? Tell me, whose bastard is this? Tell me." Under Peter's violence, Megan was terrified. She burst into tears. I don't know. I really don't know." You don't know?" Peter's rage intensified. He squeezed her shoulders until she thought her bones would break. "You slept with him, and you don't know whose child it is? Do you take me for a fool?" Faced with his interrogation and violence, Megan finally broke down and confessed everything through a flood of tears. "Yes, I wasn't sure if he was your child or his." "His? Who is he?" "My ex-boyfriend," Megan sobbed. "He was rich, but his family was against me. I met you right after we broke up. You were so good to me, and when I found out your wife was a rich CEO, I thought my future would be secure with you. It was a calculated play." "So you were still seeing him while you were with me?" Peter asked, his voice trembling with rage. Megan nodded, weeping wretchedly. "I'm sorry. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know whose it was. But your mother wanted a grandson so badly. She said she would give me everything if I had a boy. And you seemed so close to getting your wife's fortune. I took a gamble. I never thought it would turn out like this." "Shut up!" Peter screamed, shoving her roughly onto the bed. He stood there panting, feeling as if all the strength had been drained from his body. He was just a pawn in her chess game. He was just a spare tire, a fool who had been raising another man's child. The sweet love, the pitiful vulnerability, it was all an act. She had never truly loved him. She only loved the money and status he could potentially bring her. Peter started to laugh, a crazed, desolate sound. He was laughing at his own stupidity. He had abandoned his capable, wealthy wife who had given him everything and run to a cunning, manipulative vixen. He had lost everything in exchange for a bitter deception. Their love story had finally ended, its curtain falling on the rawest, most pathetic truth. The truth about the child, revealed in court, was the final blow that completely destroyed Peter. He sat there like a hollowed-out statue, staring blankly into space. All his plans and hopes had vanished like smoke. He hadn't just failed, he had become the most pathetic laughingstock. The judge's gavel brought him back to reality. The judge looked at Peter with a stern yet slightly pitying gaze as he delivered the final verdict. Having reviewed all records, evidence, and statements from both parties, the family division of the High Court rules as follows. The courtroom was silent. First, the petition for divorce between the plaintiff, Mr. Peter Harris, and the respondent, Miss Evelyn Reed, is granted. As of today, their marital relationship is officially terminated. Peter had no reaction. The divorce he had once seen as a way to escape me and seize my assets was now just a bitter reality. The judge continued in a level tone. Second, regarding the division of assets, all high-value assets, including property, vehicles, and company shares, are legally recognized as Miss Reed's prenuptial property. Therefore, the plaintiff's demand for a 50% division of assets is entirely dismissed. Mr. Harris is not entitled to any share of these assets. Mrs. Harris, sitting in the back, nearly fainted. Despite all her curses and tears, she couldn't believe her son was getting nothing. Her dream of becoming a wealthy mother-in-law, living in a penthouse and riding in luxury cars, was completely shattered. But the worst was yet to come. Third, the judge said, looking directly at Peter, his voice particularly stern. Based on the evidence submitted by the respondent, including injury photographs and hospital CCTV footage, the court finds that Mr. Peter Harris did commit an act of domestic violence against Miss Evelyn Reed. This is a serious offense that caused physical and mental suffering to the victim. Peter flinched and looked up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. Therefore, the court orders Mr. Harris to pay Miss Reed the sum of £500,000 as compensation for emotional distress. This amount must be paid within 30 days of the judgment taking effect. £500,000. The sum was the final hammer blow on Peter. Not only was he not getting any money, but he now had to pay a huge compensation sum. For a man who was penniless, £500,000 was an astronomical figure. "No! I object!" Peter leaped to his feet, screaming like a madman. "I don't have any money. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? She took everything from me. She's trying to kill me." "Order!" The judge slammed his gavel down hard. "You have the right to appeal within 15 days. Failure to comply with the judgment will result in legal consequences. This court is adjourned." The judge rose and left, leaving behind a broken Peter and a murmuring courtroom. He had lost everything: wife, home, car, money, job. Even the son he was so proud of was not his own flesh and blood. And now he was saddled with a massive debt, from a lavishly living head of projects to a debt-ridden pauper and the laughingstock of the city. I walked out of the courtroom with Olivia, my expression serene. As I passed Peter, I didn't even glance at him. To me, he was now a complete stranger, a dirty memory to be wiped clean. Mrs. Harris rushed forward as I passed, trying to grab me, spewing curses. "You bitch! You've destroyed my son. You venomous snake, you'll die a horrible death." But before she could touch me, she was restrained by the court bailiffs. I kept walking, without looking back. Her curses were now just wind whistling past my ears. Outside the courthouse, the bright summer sun shone down. I took a deep breath. My chest felt strangely light. The war was over, and I had won. But it wasn't a joyous victory. It was just a necessary end to a past mistake. From now on, Peter Harris and his family would have nothing to do with my life. He would have to face the consequences of his own actions, penniless, in debt, raising another man's child that was the most fitting judgment for a traitor. Life without Evelyn was worse than hell for Peter. Not only was he broke, but he was also saddled with a £500,000 debt. As soon as Megan realized Peter had no more value to her, she quickly contacted her wealthy ex-boyfriend, abandoned the baby and all the chaos, and disappeared. Peter was forced to take all sorts of manual labor jobs just to survive and pay for the baby's formula. The man who once wore tailored suits and drove luxury cars was now hauling cargo at the docks and working as a laborer on construction sites. The harsh reality nearly drove him mad. In his extreme desperation, Peter thought of me again. He thought of our luxurious past, of my past softness towards him. He convinced himself that I was just angry, and that if he showed true remorse, my heart would soften. He decided to make one last gamble, playing the sympathy card. One rainy afternoon, Peter came to the Orion Capitol building with his mother. Instead of his previous disheveled appearance, he wore old, worn clothes that were as clean as he could make them. They were stopped by security in the ground floor lobby. "I'm sorry. Miss Reed has said she will not see you." But Peter was prepared for this. Instead of causing a scene, he suddenly fell to his knees in the middle of the bustling lobby. "Please, I'm begging you," he cried out, his voice hoarse and pitiful. "Please, just let me see her. I just want to say I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong." His actions immediately drew the attention of everyone in the lobby. Employees from other companies, clients coming and going, everyone stopped to stare. Mrs. Harris immediately joined the act, collapsing to the floor, wailing about her son's suffering and her former daughter-in-law's cruelty. "My daughter-in-law is rich, but she abandoned my son. She looks down on him because he's poor. Where in the world is there such a heartless woman?" Their performance turned the lobby into a circus. The security guards were at a loss. They couldn't forcibly remove a kneeling man and a crying old woman. The news quickly reached me. Sarah rushed in, her face worried. "Miss Reed, Mr. Harris and his mother are causing a scene in the lobby. He's on his knees and refusing to leave." I was reviewing a project report. I didn't even look up as I said coldly, "Let them be. Let them act. I want to see how long they can last." But Peter was more persistent than I thought. He knelt there for 2 hours in the pouring rain under the judgmental stares of onlookers. He looked pale and haggard, his clothes soaked through, a truly pathetic sight. Finally, I decided to end this farce. I wouldn't let these lowlifes tarnish my company's image. I stood up and went straight down to the lobby. My appearance caused a further stir in the crowd. When Peter saw me, his eyes lit up as if he had seen his savior. He crawled on his knees towards me, trying to grab my legs. "Evelyn! Evelyn, please!" he begged, looking up, his haggard face streaked with rain and tears. "Forgive me. Just this once. I was wrong. I'm a bastard, worse than an animal. I never should have hit you. I never should have betrayed you." He started slapping his own face, the sound sharp and pathetic. "See? I'm being punished. I've lost everything. My life is not worth living. Evelyn, I still love you. Can't we start over? I promise I'll never hurt you again. I'll be your dog for the rest of my life. This desperate performance. The old me might have softened, but the me of today had a heart of stone. I took a step back, avoiding his dirty hands. I looked down at the man, kneeling at my feet, my eyes devoid of any emotion. Get up, Peter. Don't dirty the floor of this building. My cold voice made him freeze. You love me? I scoffed. No, you don't love me. You love the luxurious life I gave you. Now that you've lost it all, you've come back to put on this show, haven't you? No, that's not true, he denied frantically. I truly loved you. Enough, I cut him off. I'm tired of hearing it. We were over the day. You raised your hand to me. You should be glad I haven't sued you for defamation and assault. I turned to the head of security. Escort these two out. If they continue to cause a disturbance, call the police. After speaking, I turned to leave, giving him no further chance to speak. Evelyn, don't go, Peter cried out desperately as he was dragged away by security. Evelyn, you're a heartless, soulless woman. You'll regret this. I swear you'll regret this. I won't regret it. The one who should have regrets is you, Peter. You will regret this for the rest of your life. After being miserably thrown out of the company, Peter's path to appealing to my sympathy was completely blocked. Desperation turned to rage. A cornered man often does crazy things, and Peter was no exception. He turned to his final tactic: threats and blackmail. A few days later, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The sender was Peter. The content was no longer a pitiful plea, but an outright threat. Evelyn, don't push a person too far. I know what you fear most is losing your reputation. Your investment fund is in a critical growth phase right now. What do you think investors would say if unfavorable rumors started spreading? That the female CEO has a complicated private life, that she treated her ex-husband cruelly, or even that she has some shady business secrets. He continued, I was the head of projects, remember? I know a few of your secrets. You wouldn't want them on the front page of the papers, would you? Give me 10 million pounds. Think of it as hush money. Once I get the money, I will disappear from your life immediately. If not, don't blame me for not considering our past. I read the email and couldn't help but laugh. Business secrets? A man who could do nothing but run projects into the ground knew what secrets? He was overestimating himself. And as for my reputation, did he really think such baseless rumors could bring me down? I didn't reply. My silence seemed to infuriate him. The next day, he sent another email, this time with a few attachments he considered evidence. They were just a few old project proposals that he had deliberately misinterpreted. This is just the beginning, Evelyn. I'll give you 3 days to think about it. If 10 million pounds aren't in my account in 3 days, these materials will be sent to every major news outlet in London. I decided it was time to end this drama for good. I couldn't let a leech like Peter continue to cling to my life. I arranged to meet him at a quiet cafe. I hoped this would be the last time I ever had to see his face. Peter arrived at the cafe looking confident. He believed he held my weakness in his hands. So, have you thought it over? He sneered, sitting across from me. I said nothing, quietly placing a tablet on the table and turning the screen towards him. Before we talk about 10 million pounds, I think there's something you should see first. A video started playing on the screen. It was the security camera footage from the hospital that day. It clearly showed, from multiple angles, Peter screaming, cursing, and ruthlessly striking me across the face. Peter's face instantly changed. Where did you get this? You don't need to know, I replied coldly. You just need to know that if this video is handed to the police, you'll be charged with assault. How many years in prison do you think that's worth? He was speechless. I didn't give him a chance to recover before clicking on another file. This time, it was an audio recording. All right, Mom, let her go on her business trip. It's a good chance to take Megan to the hospital. By the time she gets back, everything will be settled. Then we can slowly figure out a way to take over the company and kick her out. She's just a woman, and she can't even have kids. Without a son, she's bound to lose everything sooner or later. It was Peter's voice, from a phone call with his mother that I had accidentally overheard that night. I had secretly recorded it. This was my real trump card. Hearing his own voice, his own dirty scheme laid bare, Peter completely broke down. His face was as white as a sheet, and his whole body trembled. He looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with arrogance, but with absolute terror. You. He couldn't form a complete sentence. I turned off the tablet and put it back in my bag. I looked him straight in the eye and said, my voice as cold as ice but firm, Peter, what do you think you have in your hands? The things you call secrets are a joke to me. But the things I have are more than enough to send you to prison. Do you understand what I mean? He nodded frantically, cold sweat soaking his back. 10 million pounds? I sneered. Now I'll give you a choice. 1. I took out a thick wad of cash from my wallet, a few £1,000s, and threw it on the table. Take this money and get out. Go to another country, anywhere. Just don't ever appear before me again. Or 2, we meet at the police station. Choose. Peter looked at the cash on the table, then at me with panicked eyes. He knew he had lost. Lost miserably and irrevocably. With a trembling hand, he snatched the money, stuffed it into his pocket, and stumbled to his feet. He didn't dare to look me in the eye. I'll take the first option. With that, he scrambled out of the cafe as if fleeing from a demon. I was left alone to finish my now cold coffee. The final act had finally come to a close. That man would now be gone from my life forever. After Peter Harris had completely vanished from my life, I felt as though the very air around me had become cleaner. But I knew that to truly begin a new life, I had to thoroughly cleanse the traces of the past. The first thing I did was put the Mayfair penthouse up for sale. The home was beautiful, a place my parents had helped me choose, but it held too many painful memories. Every corner reminded me of Peter, of the false days I had once believed were happiness. I didn't want to live in a space haunted by the shadow of betrayal. Olivia was a little surprised by my decision. Are you sure, Evelyn? It's a fantastic property. I'm sure, I replied firmly. I need a completely fresh start. Keeping it will only keep me tied to the past. I didn't care if it sold for a high or low price. I just wanted it gone. Thanks to its prime location and luxurious design, the penthouse quickly found a new owner. The day I signed the contract, I felt no regret, only an immense sense of liberation, as if I had shed a heavy shell that had been weighing me down for years. Next, I decided to implement a major reform at Orion Capital. The incident with Peter, the former head of projects, exposed loopholes in our company's personnel management and performance evaluation systems. A similar incident could never be allowed to happen again. I called an emergency meeting with all executives and department heads. When I walked into the boardroom, people looked a little surprised. I had delegated many tasks to my vice presidents recently, due to personal matters. Some had started spreading malicious rumors that my personal life had affected my work, and that my position was becoming unstable. Today, I would put all those rumors to rest. I stood before them in a chic, authoritative business suit. My expression was cool, my sharp gaze sweeping across the room. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice strong and clear. "I haven't called this meeting to discuss the past. The past should be left behind. Today, we are going to talk about the future of Orion Capital." I announced a completely new growth strategy, an ambitious and bold plan, targeting high-tech investment sectors and the global market. I provided in-depth analysis of the potential, risks, and execution roadmap. Every number, chart, and point I presented was sharp, logical, and persuasive. The boardroom was silent, everyone listening intently. Their initial surprise gradually turned into admiration. They were seeing a completely different Evelyn Reed. Not a woman suffering from personal turmoil, but a queen of the business world, full of wisdom, courage, and determination. To execute this strategy, I continued, we need an efficient and clean organization. Therefore, effective today, I am completely restructuring our performance evaluation and KPI system at all levels. From junior staff to department heads, every position will be reassessed based on actual ability and results. Those who perform well will be promoted and rewarded. Those who cannot meet the requirements, please leave. Orion Capital is not a place for freeloaders. My decisive declaration made a few people who had been slacking off turn pale. But the vast majority looked excited. They saw a new future and new opportunities for the company and for themselves. After the meeting ended with unanimous approval and high spirits, I stood alone in the boardroom, looking out at the magnificent London skyline through the large glass windows. The storm had passed. The ashes of my failed marriage hadn't buried me. Instead, I had been reborn from them, stronger and more resolute. The past had been cleared away, and the future was wide open before me. And I, Evelyn Reed, was ready to conquer it. 6 months flew by in the blink of an eye. The humid London summer gave way to a gentle autumn. My life, after weathering that terrible storm, finally found its peace. I no longer lived in the Mayfair penthouse. I had decisively sold it along with its tainted memories. I now lived in a city center apartment with a panoramic view of London's glittering skyline. It was smaller, but it was entirely mine, with no trace of the past. I woke up at 6 a.m. every day, not because of work pressure, but for an hour of yoga. I learned to breathe deeply and find my inner calm. My yoga instructor said my aura had changed. It was no longer a sharp defensiveness, but a calm strength that emanated from within. Work at Orion Capital was thriving after the vigorous reforms. The bold projects I had initially proposed, which were met with considerable doubt, were now generating massive returns, silencing all speculation and cementing my unshakable position. I no longer needed to strive to prove anything. My abilities and results were the most powerful statement. On weekends, I no longer buried myself in work. I spent time with my parents, eating warm, home-cooked meals and listening to their rambling stories. Seeing me completely free from the shadow of my failed marriage, they were finally at ease. My father, a businessman his entire life, patted my shoulder and said, "My daughter, now you've truly become a woman." This afternoon I met Olivia at a quiet tea house. My best friend was still as sharp and energetic as ever. "Look at you," Olivia said, taking a sip of tea and scanning me from head to toe. "A woman is truly most beautiful when she belongs to no one. This aura, Even I'm falling for you. I laughed. Stop teasing. I just feel more at ease. It's not just ease, Olivia said with sincere eyes. It's freedom. Before, no matter how strong you were, there was always this invisible shackle called Peter Harris in your eyes. You always had to consider his feelings, to protect his ego. But now, you're living only for yourself. The you right now is the real you, Evelyn. I quietly mulled over her words. She was right. Before, I had lived for love, for an unworthy man. I had shackled myself, exhausted myself. Now that the shackle was gone, I realized how vast and blue the world outside was. Thank you, Liv. I couldn't have gotten through all this so easily without you. There's no need for thanks between us, Olivia smiled. Seeing you happy and thriving is the best reward for me. So, has our esteemed CEO caught the eye of any new men lately? I shook my head. Not yet. For now, I just want to enjoy this single life. Love was no longer the most important thing to me. It was fine to be without it. I had learned to give myself happiness. I didn't need to depend on anyone to be whole. We chatted for a long time. The gentle afternoon sun streamed through the window, bathing everything in a golden light. I watched the people hurrying along the street and felt a strange peace in my heart. The storm had truly passed. All that remained was a clear sky and a new life waiting for me. My life continued on this peaceful trajectory. I focused on my work, my self-care, and the people I loved. The name Peter Harris and the memories associated with him were like an old object tossed into a corner of my mind, gathering a thick layer of dust over time. It wasn't that I intentionally tried to forget. I simply no longer cared. He was less than a stranger to me. Then one day, at a dinner for business leaders, I happened to overhear a story. The storyteller was Mr. Davies, an old business partner. He was talking with a few others about the troublesome son of the chairman of a large property group. You haven't heard? Old Mr. Jensen's son has been dealing with a bit of a mess lately, Mr. Davies said, lowering his voice with a look of intrigue. Apparently, the young mistress he was keeping on the side was, well, also seeing some other bloke. She even had a baby with him. The truth only came out after the birth. Young Jensen was so furious he had his people beat the other guy half to death. I was standing nearby, wine glass in hand, and paused slightly at the story. It sounded vaguely familiar. Someone else asked curiously, "Really? Who was this other bloke, to have such nerve?" "I heard he used to be quite successful," Mr. Davies continued, his voice full of contempt. "Some kind of director at his ex-wife's company. But the fool cheated, got kicked out by his wife with nothing. When he ran out of money, he tried to get a payday from young Jensen's mistress, thinking her baby was his. What a complete laughingstock." Although Mr. Davies didn't state the name, I knew they were talking about Peter Harris, the CEO ex-wife, the affair, being left penniless, mistaking another man's child for his own. All the details matched perfectly. So that's what happened. After I exposed everything, Megan had been found out by her real lover, the Jensen heir. And poor Peter, the cuckold, had become the target of his wrath. I could imagine what Peter must have gone through. A beating, humiliation, and threats to never speak of it again. I felt neither satisfaction nor pity, only a strange sense of calm. It was the ending he deserved. You reap what you sow. Karma has a way of working itself out. He had used violence against me, and now violence had been visited upon him. The cycle was started by him, and he had to bear the consequences. I quietly turned and walked out onto the balcony. A gentle London night breeze blew past. I took a sip of wine, the bittersweet taste spreading in my mouth. A few days later, Olivia called me. "Evelyn, did you hear the news?" "About Peter." "I think so," I replied nonchalantly. "Knew you would," Olivia laughed. "A friend in the police told me he had a few ribs broken and fled back to his village. He's deep in debt, had to sell his ancestral home to pay it off. His mother had a stroke from the shock and is bedridden. Truly, what goes around, comes around." "Yes," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "You don't feel any satisfaction?" Olivia asked. I was silent for a moment, then said, "No, Liv, I don't feel anything anymore. How he lives or dies now, it doesn't matter to me. He's just a chapter in an old book, and I turned to a new page a long time ago." She was right. No matter how miserable Peter's life became, it had nothing to do with me anymore. I had wasted too much time and emotion on an unworthy person. Now, I just wanted to focus on my life and the people who truly loved me. The news of the traitor was just a passing breeze, unable to create a single ripple on the calm lake of my heart. To celebrate the success of a major project, I decided to treat myself and my entire staff to a holiday that also served as a volunteer trip. Our destination was a mountain village in the Lake District. Beautiful scenery, but the residents still faced many hardships. We brought boxes of books, clothes, and school supplies for the children at the local primary school. Seeing the children, dressed in old, worn clothes, and running around barefoot, their eyes lighting up at the small gifts, filled my heart with an indescribable warmth. Sometimes, happiness was this simple. While everyone was playing games and distributing gifts, I noticed a little girl huddled in a corner of the school playground. Her face was pale, and beads of sweat dotted her forehead. I quickly went over and placed my hand on her forehead. She was burning up. The child had a high fever. "Are you all right?" I asked with concern. The girl just shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. The teachers said the nearest clinic was too far away, and the roads were treacherous. Just as I was wondering what to do, a man walked out of the school's small infirmary. He was wearing an old but clean and well-ironed white coat. He was tall and lean, with a calm and reliable air about his angular face. "The child has a high fever," he said, his voice low and steady. He quickly took her temperature and pulled a fever reducer from his medical bag. "It's all right, just a flu. She'll be fine after some medicine and rest." He was incredibly patient and gentle as he helped the girl take the medicine. After the girl had fallen asleep, he finally turned to me. "Thank you for noticing her. I'm Daniel Evans. I do medical volunteering here." He extended his hand with a gentle smile. "Hello, I'm Evelyn Reed." I shook his hand. His palm was warm and firm. "Are you the doctor here?" "Only on weekends," he explained. "On weekdays, I work at a public hospital, but the medical facilities here are so lacking, I come to help whenever I can." I looked at him, a deep respect welling up inside me. In this society filled with competition and calculation, there were still people like him, willing to dedicate their time and effort to such simple, meaningful work. He was completely different from the men I usually met, with their fine suits and grand words. "That's truly admirable," I said sincerely. Daniel just smiled. "It's nothing. Helping others is a joy in itself. The same goes for your group, doesn't it? The gifts you brought are a great joy to these children." We talked for a while longer. He told me about the lives of the people here and the difficulties they faced. I talked about my work and the investment projects I was leading. We came from completely different worlds, but we found common ground in our outlook on life and human values. When my group was ready to leave, Daniel walked me to the gate.